get into their other networks and other things. So security isn't often thought about when these devices are being created. So with that, it brings us to the last device. Out of all the devices we've covered thus far, what do you think is the #1 most attacked XIoT device? Did you say cameras? Yep, you're right. #1 are cameras. And there's a few reasons for this. We were working with a casino. This casino had 27,000 security cameras. They had security cameras that were just there to watch other security cameras. They had a lot of security cameras. And I think all of us would agree that casinos have a pretty high power bill. So these cameras were taken over to do cryptojacking. They were mining crypto. That's all they were doing. They were just mining crypto. Why use these to mine crypto? Because it's a Linux server that's more powerful than the laptop. And there was a lot of them. And they said, this is a great place to do it. And I'd love to say that some incident response group caught it, or it created an alert that made it to a SIM, or something happened. No. The person that caught it was the lady that worked for the company that managed the power bill. And she says, why is our power bill 1,700 times higher than it was last month? Because crypto mining sucks a lot of power. And when you're a casino, that must have been a pretty big bill, right? There was another case in a casino unrelated to this where you might have heard this. Did you guys hear about the thermometer attack for the fish tank? So some attackers compromised a thermometer in a fish tank, but from there they gained access to the whale database, all the high rollers, their financial information, their home information, probably proclivities of those individuals. And that was all free for the taking because of a thermometer. But these cameras were a big deal. And the thing about cameras, again, is you have a lot of them. They're not secured by security folks. But the worst thing about them is this. When you do say, wow, look at all these problems you have with your security cameras, Casino One, you have 27,000 devices that are do crypto mining. Who's responsible for this? And everyone's in the room that they think should be responsible. Facility says, oh, no, it's not us. That's network security. Network security says, it's not us. That's IT security. IT security is, nope, that's outsourced to Hikvision or somebody else as a third party. So remember the end of Spider-Man where they're all pointing at each other? Cameras. That's why. And again, the bad guys know this. And that dates all the way back to that Mirai attack we talked about in 2016. They're big, easy targets that can be used for a lot of malicious things. I can do crypto mining. I can spy on you. I can use that as a pivot point to attack IT assets and exfiltrate data. They're just little Linux servers. Now, we've covered a few different areas. I just wanted to kind of show you how expansive this is. We talked a little bit about industrial Internet of Things, but certainly on the battlefield side as well. So we work with a lot of military organizations here and abroad, and they have big concerns about aircraft and terrestrial vehicles and actual soldiers and the devices that they have on them. Things are very, very connected. If you think about it, the first IoT device came out in 1990. It was released at Interop. You guys know what it was? It was a toaster. It was a TCP/IP toaster back in 1990. Fast forward to 2020, Dublin, Ireland becomes the first smart city. The entire city is interconnected, right? So now we're going to battlefield things, to healthcare devices, smart ships, smart buildings, smart cities, which all kind of falls into the same category. Some of them float. These are all just things. And these things are just unmanaged, insecure, critical assets that are on your network. Again, those of you that are in college or high school that are here today, this is going to be a great area to focus on for the next couple decades at least. So that's kind of the bad side. Let's talk a little bit about how you can kind of remediate some of these threats. So we talked about earlier how there's about 3 to 5 of these devices per person, per company, 10,000 people, 30 to 50,000 devices. The first part's just discovering them. And I'm going to share a couple different vendors at the end. I think I've got like a half dozen or so, because this is a new category. It's not like a firewall or a SIM or a vulnerability scanner that we've all been dealing with. These are what are called enterprise XIoT security platforms. For some of you, you probably haven't even heard that term. But again, these are the new. So what's wrong with old school discovery? So what's one way you can discover something on a network? Scan. Well, the problem with scanning is it usually works by sending malformed packets to a device. And if you're an IT device and you're using Tenable or Qualys or Rapid7 or one of those legacy scanners, that's fine. But if you go to somebody that works in a SCADA environment and say, hey, we're going to go ahead and run these devices, sending malformed packets to all your OT devices, they're going to chase you out of that room and probably carrying a wrench. They're not going to be very happy. So scanning doesn't really work. because if you scan an XIoT device, even some cameras, you can knock it over and kill it. So sniffing. Okay, let's sniff the network. Well, that's a lot of span ports. That's a lot of taps. That's a lot of money when you have 30 to 50,000 devices for a 10,000 person company, right? So it can be very expensive. Plus, a lot of the information is encrypted. So you might be able to say, I'm 60% sure this device is a printer. Well, it might turn out to be an MRI machine. And some people base it on the OUI, the organizationally unique identifier, the first 6 octets of the MAC address. That's not always very telling. So if you want to go beyond just discovery and actually start fixing things, you don't want to turn a $2 million MRI machine into a $500 HP BubbleJet printer, right? People tend to dislike that. So old school scanning, old school sniffing using OUI generally doesn't work. So these enterprise XIoT devices, they use what's called interrogation. The best way I can explain it is think of C-3PO from Star Wars. He was a protocol droid. He could speak millions and millions of languages, like water evaporators. So if you speak to the printer the way the printer wants to be spoken to, or the switch, or the PLC, you're speaking in a way it's expecting. You're not sending a malformed packet. You're not scanning for vulnerabilities. You're not scanning 65,000 ports. You're simply communicating the way it's meant to. So 1, you don't knock it over, and 2, you're able to extract all that valuable metadata. And why is that valuable metadata important? Because when you go on to the next step, and the most important step is, okay, now I found all my devices, now I want to fix them. We talked about how the average age of the firmware was 6 years old. Well, how would you upgrade your cameras before? You had to send somebody around with a paperclip resetting things and sticking a USB in there. So you're not going to do it. There's no manual way at scale to address XIoT. So these enterprise XIoT security platforms can actually upgrade the firmware. And they're smart enough because of the metadata extraction to say, oh, you're on version 4. Version 7 is the newest one, but you have to go 4, 5, 6, 7, or you can go straight from 4 to 7. And they can even downgrade. Oh, you're on version 7? Version 7 has a Log4j vulnerability. But the vendor's like, we're not going to have another version of the firmware out for another year. Well, everyone's scanning for Log4j right now, but version 6 doesn't, so you can downgrade. So being able to move those around really makes a lot of sense. Now, in the olden days being like a year ago, people used to hide these things behind VLANs. And that's fine, nothing against VLANs. VLANs are a great part of any organizational architecture security practice. But all you're doing is taking something broken and vulnerable with a default password and sticking it on another subnet. It's analogous to saying, oh, I'm up here typing and I cut open my left hand, it's bleeding all over the place. I should go see a doctor. But as an alternate, I just wrap my hand in a plastic bag and put duct tape around it. So I guess it's good because I'm not getting blood on my right hand, but I still have a bloody hand in a bag, which is usually a bad idea. So that's kind of what VLANs do. Again, by themselves, they're not a panacea. They can help, though. So the first thing, discover your devices. Second thing, upgrade the firmware. And being able to do that at scale is important. Upgrade all 10,000 printers, all 30,000 cameras, so on and so forth. And then harden. So this, like we talked about those printers, my printer doesn't have to be running Bluetooth. Maybe I don't want it to run wireless. Maybe I don't want it to run clear text protocols. So harden those devices as well by pushing those things out. Again, a big sort of step for XIoT, kind of IT security 1990s. So I found my device, I hardened it, and I upgraded the firmware. The next thing is managing the credentials and the certs. So we talked about before, 50% of the passwords are default, no hacking required. But if you can tie your XIoT devices into your PAM solutions, CyberArk, HashiCorp, Thycotic, so on and so forth, that's great. Oh, but wait, there's a problem. Those PAM solutions don't talk to XIoT. Well, that's okay, because the PAM solution can talk to an enterprise XIoT security platform, which acts as an intermediary and then talks to the endpoint. So as that discovery process happens, when you're doing discovery of the XIoT, you can automatically enroll them in the PAM. And now you can change the password every 90 days. You can set your capabilities. And just like you know about the firmware, hey, I know the firmware path is upgraded from 4 to 5 to 6, then 7. You know that the password capability is, oh, I can only have a 10-character password. I can only have a 4-digit numeric PIN because I was built in the 1980s and my company depreciates me like a turbine. Mm-hmm. Or they say, and we've seen weird stuff like, you can have any password but not the letter B. I have no idea why. It's not even a SQL injection thing. So by having that knowledge, now you can control those credentials. And the other part of that is certs. Wireless access points are notorious for having expired certs, TLS version 1.1, 1.2, self-signed. all sorts of other problems, cryptologically unsecure systems, and that makes them vulnerable as well. So the same thing that you're able to manage the passwords, the credentials, you can manage the certs. So now you're looking pretty good. I found my devices, I've hardened my devices, I've upgraded the firmware, I'm managing the credentials, and I'm managing the certs. We're looking pretty good at this point. So now you've fixed everything. Now you want to keep it fixed in perpetuity. So we talked about before how these tools do interrogation. So now the idea is I'm going to re-interrogate these devices every day because I was on version 5 of the firmware, but now I'm version 3. I did have an awesome, super cool password, but now my password is APC. Maybe somebody took a paperclip and they reset that device because it's really easy to do that in XIoT devices. Now it's back to the default build. So across your 50,000 devices, you'd like to get an alert in Splunk or ServiceNow or Demisto or one of your other tools to say, hey, you know what? Something that was secure is no longer secure. You have 50,000 devices, but here's the 5 you need to take a look at right now. So that addresses that environmental drift, because when you're talking XIoT, it's all about scale. If you only had 5 devices, somebody could just run around and manage these things, but you don't. You have thousands, so it doesn't get done. And the last bit of that is reporting. How cool would it be to have a report that just says, yep, you have 50,000 devices, 20,000 have default passwords, 15,000 are end-of-life firmware. You've got clear text protocols open on these. You've got 8, 9, and 10 vulnerabilities on these. You just have a good picture of what's happening. And then you also have a solution that can help remediate it. Don't just discover, but fix them. And you can actually get that to green. The worst thing in the world is to say, oh, I've got 50,000 devices and I have 100,000 vulnerabilities. Okay, good luck. But now you have a way to actually address this. So to kind of wrap things up, most organizations don't know what things they have. So discovery is a really, really important part of this. And because of that, they don't know which things to fix. And even if they did know what things to fix because of the scale of this problem, they can't fix it with automation because they didn't have anything in place before. These enterprise XIoT security platforms that are listed here below, they weren't around a decade ago. And some of these play in a little bit of different areas. Some of them just focus on discovery, some focus on remediation, some a combination of the two. But if you keep in mind, again, that there's no difference really in these XIoT devices and a laptop, except they're insecure and they're on your network, it starts to really make you say, okay, this is something I should really start paying attention to because the cyber criminals are paying attention to it and the nation states are paying attention to this. So the last thing I'll leave you with is this. Again, all my travels and all my conversations with big businesses, small businesses, governments, they're finding that they can no longer be passive when it comes to this. The bad guys are hoping you'll be passive. They're hoping you're going to go, oh, I've got 10 other high priority things to focus on before I focus on the fact that I have 50,000 default password devices on my network. They're hoping you're not going to address this because they're investing heavy in tools to discover and attack these. So disappoint them because this is going to be how they're going to get in. If you guys want to contact me again, here's my contact information. You can see me down at the Phosphorus booth. And then again, Andrew, want to raise your hand up there in the back corner, as you might remember from Fast and Furious version 3, Tokyo Drift. But treat him like a regular guy, just a regular guy. Please come by and talk to us, and we'll be more than happy to drill down on any of these topics with you. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.